Let me introduce you to a new tool by the makers of Fillout called Zite. Now, I haven't seen any content on Zite so far. There's not that many people who have access because they're releasing slowly off of a wait list. You can get on that wait list by finding the founders on LinkedIn and messaging them. But basically, this is their take on a vibe coding, if you will, AI application. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed. Now, a little bit about me. I usually build tools and apps with Bubble or other no-code tools. I use N8N for back-end automation. I don't really do vibe coding or generally use AI to build out full applications. But I wanted to test this out because Fillout is a really great tool and the team behind it puts out great products. So I wanted to see what they would do with this tool. And I was really amazed with what I could very quickly build out, and it got me thinking about all of the possibilities here. Now, I'm going to say right now, this is a super early stage product. This is like, I don't even know if it's a beta or what, but it's extremely early stage, and they definitely have a lot of things that they need to do, and they know that. But there's so much like good bare bones here that I think it's worth talking about. So this is the main interface when you get access to it. You have your apps at the bottom. You can click into any of them and continue the conversation with the agent. The idea with Zite is that you can do the normal vibe coding thing, write what you want, try to build it, and it has an agentic workflow, so it's not just a singular message that then changes one bit of code, but it's trying to iterate and make lots of changes based on one message. And the big thing that they've done is they've kind of merged the idea of AI coding with no code. And they've done that in a really creative way. I'll show you what I mean in a second. And then the other thing they've done is try to build in no code integrations with common tools. Right now they only have Google Sheets, Airtable, OpenAI, and Slack. You can see that these are coming soon, and then after that there's going to be even more. I'm guessing they will have a similar integration list as Fillout currently has. Notice they haven't integrated with themselves yet, which is funny. I know I mentioned on LinkedIn that Supabase would be really great for building the back end. They said that's something they'll work on as well, but I'm guessing it'll be after some of these other ones. So keep that in mind. That's kind of the approach they're taking. This is like a front-end builder with React, TypeScript, that type of stuff. And then on the back end, it's trying to use these other no-code tools to do some of that back-end logic. So let's take a look at an example of what I've made with Zite. This is the automation ROI calculator. Now I have a similar thing that I built for myself on my site, and this is a Bubble app, and it's not nearly as pretty. This took maybe 10 hours to build. Could have taken less if I knew exactly what I wanted from the beginning, but you can adjust a few parameters here. You can type in different numbers, and it gives you some just adjustments so you can see how much you will save over a year span or more for that specific automation. Okay. I basically took the same ideas and recreated it in Zite. This is the entire conversation I had. It was functional from the very beginning, pretty much, but then I just tweaked it further. So I said, I want to build an ROI calculator for automations. It needs to have inputs where you can list how long the current process takes, etc. And this is how it responds. It really summarizes the changes it makes and tries to kind of put icons to it to make it very easy to see what it did. I'm going to talk about this in a second and why there's some downsides to this, but it is a very interesting approach. And I also initially assumed that from the makers of Fillout that this would sort of take the elements and pre-built interfaces that Fillout has and try to kind of shoehorn your app into that. And I was totally wrong about that. It is able to adapt to very specific requests for changes to the interface, and it does so very logically, and most importantly, it uses a theme and makes a cohesive looking app from simple changes. And I don't even have to think about, well, you don't really have to think too much about the UI and UX because it does a pretty good job of it by itself, and then you can ask for simple adjustments. Now, here's where it gets crazy. You can hit edit, and from there, you can select elements, and then you can change different aspects of that element. Okay, you can edit the text, you can do all of these things, or you can hit edit with AI to prompt the AI to make it an edit to the specific element. So this is the no code part of it. Like, you can visually see what you're building as you're building it, and you can make edits to it as you build it as well. There isn't a lot that you can do with this, but it is great for those fine-tune adjustments where it doesn't really make sense to prompt the AI to make a simple change to, the size of a font or whatever. So you can see the options that you can choose kind of depend on what element you're selecting. Definitely a very interesting approach to this, but as you can see, there's certain things that are not going to be that adjustable. It's not like I can go in here and change like the color of the table or something like that. So there are some interesting ideas around editing with no code. What's also cool about this is that they don't hide the code from you. So you can go into the code and see what the heck is actually going on. You can see they're using Tailwind for CSS. This has been consistent on all of the projects I've done. They use TypeScript and React. I don't know what I'm talking about really when it comes to coding. I haven't been doing any real coding in a long time, but this is what I've noticed from what I've taken a look at here. Now, this can also be really useful for just seeing why it's behaving a certain way. If a feature isn't quite working and the AI isn't getting it for you correctly, you can just take a look at the code, and you can also edit it directly in here. It doesn't keep you from editing the code. You can, of course, break it by doing that, but that's I really like that they've added this manual control. That's really cool. You've got responsive mode, so you can see it in different devices in full screen mode and refresh and all that. Now, the other interesting thing they've done here is they've added workflows. So from what I can see, they only build workflows and show them on this tab when it's related to some sort of integration, one of their no-code integrations. So let's say that you want to save this stuff into a database. It's going to go into, you have to choose the database to save it into, and their options really are Google Sheets and Airtable at the moment. I don't love those as backends for an app, but it's great for a quick MVP. So when you do that and you prompt it to create that feature, it's going to create a workflow, and you can see here it's called by Zite manually. You can edit a little bit, but not really. Like, if you see, you can't edit anything with Google Sheets. You can edit the code, and you can see that it will, like in this example, it's getting information from Google Sheets, and it's formatting it in the correct format that it needs for the app to work. So you could, go in here and change like this from a parse float to parse int, for example. So you'd have the ability to edit that. But overall, the workflows, you're not going to be able to really edit in here. I think that will change. Fillout, the form builder, already has a workflow editor in there, and they have a lot more fine-tune control built in. So I'm guessing this is just one of the things that's going to come with time. For now, it's a very bare bones experience, and I have yet to come in here and try to edit one of these workflows because there's just not much control. As you can see, you can't delete the workflow, you can't create a workflow, and this has caused problems in a couple of the apps that I've tried to do, where a workflow that you don't actually want to have happen anymore exists, and you just can't delete it. And sometimes even prompting the AI to get rid of it doesn't work. But that's what I've noticed there. So I want to show you another example. I don't know if I've even showed you how this works, but you've got a table view, a timeline view, and then you can save a project. You have a list of projects, and all of this data is being saved into a Google Sheet. So when you go to this projects list, it's pulling this from a Google Sheet. You can click into a project, and it'll load the calculator with that project, and you can see it dynamically changes to update project. So all of that stuff is stuff that I prompted it to do and said, I need this table. I need to be able to click into it to load that project. And I was amazed that it actually worked. I kind of thought this was going to be sort of a glorified AI form building tool, but it really is building actual functional apps. So another example I want to show you that I think is a lot more impressive and could be used by anyone is this Chatbot MVP. So for this one, on the back end, I'm using an N8N agent. I'm actually using two different N8N agent workflows. But what I've created is the ability to have a simple chat interface for talking to my N8N agent, and it's much, much better than the chat interface that N8N provides. Has a lot more features, and it allows me to quickly switch between them, which is really great for me. So I have one agent that's focused on ClickUp and being able to create tasks, as well as find tasks and other stuff. This one is an agent that helps me to create N8N workflows. And then I've even got modes, fast or powerful. On the back end in N8N, this calls a different version of the agent that's tied to a different model. So this one is using Gemini 2.5 Flash. This one's using Pro. So that gives me some fine-tuned control depending on what type of conversation I need to have and the level of intelligence needed. But there's a couple of really cool features that I built in here. And let me tell you, I was amazed by how simple it was to add these features with simple prompting. So for example, if I want to have a conversation here about an email that I'm sending back and forth with someone, and I want to create a task based on that email, I can say create a task for me tomorrow about this email. I can paste in a snippet. So I'm just hitting my clipboard, hitting paste, and it puts it into a snippet. And the reason I like this is I hate when I'm trying to write to a bot and I paste in some text, like a big JSON workflow or something, and it totally clogs up my message view. But by having this feature here, I'm able to quickly paste in these snippets and not have it clog up the view. And I'm having it on the back end send these as XML to the bot. Okay, so this is not going to be a very cohesive thing because it's not actually an email. I didn't tell ClickUp where to put the task, but it'll be interesting to see what it does with this. Hopefully it does create a task even though I didn't tell it where to put the task. And if it does, it will show you another feature that I built in here, which is the ability to parse the response and show me something based on that response. Okay, here we go. So I have this information here, but I also have this little button that I can click. And this button actually pulls up the task details that were created. And then I can click this to open it up in ClickUp. So this is enhancing the bot from just messages to an actual interface that I can interact with. And I could edit this further. I could say, hey, I want to be able to actually edit the task details on this modal and send API calls to save the changes. I could absolutely do that. It'd probably take me 1 or 2 messages to get that set up. So it is extremely powerful. I've only spent maybe an hour at most with this, and in actual time, that was probably only 10-15 minutes. I mean an hour because there's some time for it to process and make the changes. Okay, now I've shown you a couple of examples. I want to show you how it works when you're actually building the app, and then I want to talk about some of the problems that I've noticed with Zite and some of the room for improvement that it has. Okay, so let's go back to the home page and let's try to create something new. I didn't prepare a good use case ahead of time, but I'm thinking that we can build, let's see, let's build something to review people's resumes that they submit to us and approve or reject them, and then have that send a notification to Slack when that happens. Okay, so I want to create an app that allows me to review job applications and approve or deny them. If I approve the application, I want it to send a Slack notification to me with the person's details. I'm going to connect Google Sheets, and here it asks you to select the spreadsheet. And so this is the quirky part. I'll explain. Basically, if you want to do any sort of data saving, you actually need to first create your Google Sheet or your Airtable, and you need to create a structure for it. And Gemini can help actually to do that for this example. So I'm just going to do a prompt here. Okay, so this is going to go ahead and create us a sample table with some data that we can use just for testing this app out. Okay, great. Insert that there, making sure that it's, you know, the first header row and everything. I'm going to call this job applications, call this sheet job applications. Okay, and I'm also going to throw in jobs for the heck of it. I'm going to call job ID, job name. And I'm going to do this. Whoops. I want to count up to 3, 2. There. And then I'm also going to just make some of these have the same job title for an example. Okay, so we've got this data, we've got some jobs, we've got some job applications. You don't need to do this at the very beginning. You can do it later in the process. You can build it without connecting to a database first. And actually, that is often a good idea because, as I'll show you, it doesn't tend to build out everything you want on the first try. It tries to just kind of build something basic and functional, and then you can prompt it to build more. Their founder on LinkedIn was actually saying that this is an intentional choice, and that they might have a setting in the future to try to build as much as possible in the first iteration. So if you put in a really detailed prompt, it'll do that. Let's select our theme ahead of time. The theme is something I haven't even talked about, but this allows you to create an app with a simple theme without having to really think about the design, which is great. I haven't really played around with trying to edit the theme or change it. I think that's probably possible because the code is right there to edit. I'm just going to use this theme for now. You can also paste photos for reference of the layout, but I'm not going to do that right now. It should have a left pane with a list of job applications and a right pane for viewing the details, kind of like an inbox. There should also be a tab for job applications versus jobs. Later, we'll build a feature to edit jobs as well. Okay. I'm going to actually leave out Google Sheets and Slack for now and just go for this. And we're going to let that run, probably pause. I'm going to continue without it. So what it'll do, because I'm continuing without this Slack integration, it kind of assumes that you need a Slack integration because you mentioned Slack. And if you were to hit connect, it would then try to it would connect you with Slack and then try to build it in. But because I said no, it's just going to put in placeholder workflows and try to build as much as possible without actually building Slack into it. So while this loads, let me talk about some of the things I've noticed. One is it can take quite a bit of time for this initial step and even for messages that you send later to process. That makes sense. It's an agentic workflow, and that's to be expected. What I like is that they've built in a little notification when that message or when it's finished processing. So you can go and do other stuff and just wait for that to happen, get your little dopamine hit, and come back here to see what it did. That's a really cool feature. I like that. And honestly, if you're working on multiple apps at a time, you can totally do that. Just have different, like multiple tabs open and work on several sites at the same time, like you're a chess master playing multiple chess games at the same time. Oh gosh, that's very impressive. So this is our portal. I gave it very little information. This is a very good looking app that I would present to a client happily. And what it tends to do is make the front end the front end works pretty well generally. It's just when it gets to the back end that it tends to have some problems because it's not really built for creating back ends. And I'll explain a little bit more in a second. But wow, you can already see you've got different jobs, description, details. You've got your applications. Let me show you how the Google Sheet connection happens. Let's just do one at a time. So we're going to connect Google Sheets. And trust me, I hate Google Sheets as a database. It is just simply not right to use Google Sheets as a database. But for a quick MVP, this allows me to add columns really quickly and show you how it works. I don't love Airtable as a database either, just because it has limitations on table size and such. So for a production app at scale, it's just not going to be a thing. That's why I requested Supabase or Postgres or just anything that allows me to have an actual database backend. But I know that that will be coming. But for most of the use cases where vibe coding makes a lot of sense, building a quick application, something lightweight, this will be perfectly fine. Okay, so add Google Sheets. Okay, let's just see what it does with that. So that's going to take some time. So going back into the back-end stuff, if you try to get it to connect to something like Supabase, I was able to actually get that done, but it doesn't work unless you really force it to use the REST API directly. And it's not going to be really a secure option because Zite does not have like this backend server that it's setting up to do all of these API calls. It's doing it on the front end if you ask it to. The workflows are the Zite backend, and it only seems to create a workflow if you are connecting it with one of their pre-built connection tools. So like if you want a backend that's able to make edits to people's information securely, then that's only going to happen through the workflows. And if you try to force it to use a tool that's not in this list of integrations, it's going to do that through the front end, if that makes sense. The other thing is it cannot install libraries at this point. So normally if you asked AI to create an app that's connected with Supabase, it's going to use the Supabase client, or or SDK and is going to do all of the work through that client. It actually tries to do it in Zite. It kind of doesn't realize the limitation that it can't install it. And then if you go into the code, there'll be comments saying this is like placeholder for if you actually install Supabase client. So you'll see that it tends to hallucinate and like act as if it's connected you to Supabase, but then when you look into it, it's not actually doing that. So that's something to be aware of. Again, you can force it to do it. I was able to, in another application, force it to connect to Supabase. I provided the API connection information and told it, don't use the client, use the REST API, use this type of API call, and it figured it out. Another thing with this is the way that they have built this chatbot experience is it's very heavily edited and cold, so it's not going to really answer questions or ask you follow-up questions in general. It will just say, I did all these things. Here's what I did. And that's important because if you want to partner in thought, okay, well, I'm pretty impressed. It actually did what I said and didn't take additional information other than what's in Google Sheets. This is the list of people from the Google Sheet. See the jobs. Yep. There's that. Okay. Add in the application view, add a drop-down filter that allows me to choose from the list of jobs to filter the list of applications to that job. I'm not going to provide more details. See what it does with that. So to get back to my earlier thought, it doesn't really like ask you questions. It doesn't answer questions. So if you want a thought partner with AI, you're going to need to use a separate chatbot on the side. So I recommend just having like Gemini 2.5 up on one tab, and you can run ideas past Gemini and then take a lot of those ideas and paste them into this to actually create. It's not going to be a thought partner really. It's just going to do things for you and try to guess as best to your intentions. I think that's a weakness truly, but there's also strength in that because it's less likely to kind of go off the rails and try to ask you a bunch of questions instead of just creating something. So it's very much biased towards just creating. All right, filter by job. Let's do software engineer. I know we'd have multiple of those. All right, it works. So as you can see, you can build something super quickly. I'm very impressed with how it looks and how everything works. If I were to connect Slack and say, send it to this channel when I approve this person, it'll absolutely work. So yeah, just overall very impressive. And I think that although there's plenty of room to improve, it's just going to get better. So here's the workflows. You can see that because I added Google Sheets, it added these workflows. You can see the code and all that stuff. One thing to note is that if you try this app and you watch the network tab, so if we refresh this, you'll see these execute commands. And you see that it's going to a workflow and it's executing that workflow. And if you look at the payload, you can see the workflow ID that it's trying to execute, fetch job applications, fetch jobs, and then you can preview the response. So you can see that it actually is creating an internal API for these workflows. But that's, as far as I have seen, there's no other like back-end stuff that it creates. Only what shows as a workflow here is what is created as a back-end. So if I wanted to save all of this information, or like I wanted to, if I wanted to have a profile image and have that image saved in Amazon S3, I'm not going to be able to securely do that because I will need to have the API calls all happen from the front end. So if you want to create a backend for this, what I recommend is either setting up like N8N workflows and calling those workflows from Zite, or you can vibe code your own backend with any other tool like Replit or Cursor and have your own server set up and then tell Zite how to use that API that you created. So that's just one of the limitations right now. I'm sure that will change in the future, but I think that their priority for creating this right now is to make iteration really fast using the other no-code tools rather than making really robust backends with custom functionality. So it will be really interesting to see where they go with that, because I could see a world in which they open up the workflows to be able to run Node.js code, and maybe allow you to install client libraries as well, and then you could create your own backend within this interface pretty quickly, and that would work really well. So I'm very excited to see where Zite goes with this tool. This is a team that ships extremely fast. They make really good decisions. They listen to the community. So I'm excited to see what they come up with next, and I think that this tool could be one of the leading tools of the future that shows how you can use AI prompting with a no-code infrastructure to make apps really quickly and really easily.